Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Raw Knuckles podcast. We'd really appreciate it if you'd like, subscribe, and share with a friend.
I cared. That's all I could do is I cared. Uh, I didn't start playing hockey because I wanted to play in the National Hockey League. I played because I loved the game. I didn't start coaching the hockey game because I wanted to get the NHL. I coached it because I loved the game.
When I stepped on the ice, I never backed down and I never stayed down.
And I was vicious and I was malicious, and I don't care.
He's a freaking madman. Look at him going to town. That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine. Alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive.
Listen, thanks for joining us today, Raw Knuckles podcast. And, you know, God, you and I played against each other. I started my career. I was in Nova Scotia. You started in Adirondack. You were with the Wings, drafted by the Wings. And it's funny, pro hockey for me, I knew nothing. I mean, I love the Bruins, but I didn't know anything about the way it worked. Okay. And we're going to talk a bit about that today as we get going here. But I had no idea of how the inner workings in the NHL when I was a kid. And off the training camp, I'm in the American League. And I'll never forget the first night I played against you. And I told you, I was an admirer of yours from far and young kid. And I saw you in Adirondack, we were playing, and you got in a fight with one of my teammates and give it to him. And then you scored 2 goals that night. And I was like, wow, that kid's a good player. I like his style. Anyway, our paths never crossed. And I admired you from a distance. And I'll get into that a little more as we go. But your upbringing, being from the indigenous community, Garden River, Ontario. You grew up on a reservation. Um, what what was that like for you growing up on the reservation and trying to, I guess, get into the game of hockey? How did that happen?
Well, Chris. First of all, thank you very much for having me on your podcast, and I'm a big admirer of yours also for especially all that you went through and where you landed now and what you're doing now. It's great to see. So thank you for having me
Appreciate it.
on. And where I grew up, I grew up in northern Ontario, right dead center of the Great Lakes, outside the city of Sault Ste. Marie, where hometown to Phil and Tony Esposito, Ivan Boldrev, Jerry Korab. So got a real rich tradition of hockey. But I grew up in a very small First Nation community. There was about maybe 400 to 500 people when I grew up. I'm from a large family. Got 6 brothers and 5 sisters. We grew up in a house that didn't have electricity or plumbing when I first. I think we got our indoor plumbing when I moved away to Kenora, Ontario, when I was 16 years of age. So I never went into an indoor bathroom outside of maybe in school, or had a shower or a bath until then. But times were tough. We went through our moments where there wasn't too much food on the table, and the wood stove goes out in the middle of wintertime in northern Ontario. Boy, she gets cold. But outside of that, Chris, I wouldn't have changed it for the world. I mean, I had a lot of love and support. We didn't have a lot of material things, but we certainly had a lot of love and support, and everyone kind of took care of each other and protected each other. So I find my life back home was splendid growing up.
Growing up in that community, growing up in that household, 12 years, no electricity, no plumbing. I guess it didn't take you long to learn how to be grateful when you got some things as a youngster, right? A lot of kids, they grew up with some with excess, some with not a lot, but the grateful piece, did that come in pretty young for you?
Oh, it came in very, very, very young. I was very thankful for everything, and I realized uh, really early in age that we weren't privileged with a lot of things. We didn't have a car. I joined the recreation league in Sault Ste. Marie when I was, I think, about 10 years old. Um, And I tell this story everywhere I go. I fell in love with the game of hockey in my backyard, and I made that rink in my backyard, just like walking in life. It's one pail of water at a time. I filled up a bucket about this big, walked around my corner of my house, put it on some snow, packed it down with my feet. Somebody asked me how many pails of water. I bet you I must have a couple thousand pails of water to make a hockey rink. But my first pair of skates were size 6, 7. My feet were size 3. I remember putting my rubber boots inside to make them a little bit more snug and tie them up. And basically, that's where I learned to play hockey on reserve. And then my family finally got enough money to put it together so I can join the recreation league in Sault Ste. Marie. So I played recreational hockey my whole life, no AAA, no AA. And there's somebody upstairs must have been watching out for me because somebody saw me play somewhere and asked me to go try out for the Sioux Greyhounds of all teams when I was 17 years old. And Wayne Gretzky played there, Craig Hartsburg, Greg Millen. There was a lot of really good players, and I was asked to go try out when I was 17 years of age.
So who was it that saw you the first time when you asked to go? No organized hockey, just rec hockey, and then you up going to Sioux. How often were you off the res as a kid, though? Like did you get off the res often?
Only when I had to.
Yeah.
I went to school. We actually, there's a big thing in Canada right now with the residential schools and how horrific of a. But our family, we didn't go. We went to a thing called the day school, where the day school was at least they let us come home at nighttime, so we're relatively safe outside of the ear pulling and the humiliation they caused us at school once in a while. So it wasn't too bad, but that's basically I really believe a gentleman passed away a number of years ago. His name was Bill LeClaire, and he owned he was a manager of our house league midget team. And he was a good friend of one of the gentlemen who owned the Sioux Greyhounds. So I really believe he's the one who kind of asked him, said, "Hey, you got to take a look at this guy." Then all of a sudden, I went out to training camp. I didn't make the team, but they sent me out to Kenora, Ontario, which is the Manitoba Junior Hockey League. But in the summertime, he gave me a job in his construction company. So I think Bill LeClaire would be the guy who really, really kind of helped me with the hockey outside of recreation hockey.
Was that happening with like other players in your community? Or were you kind of like the only one?
No, I was the only one.
Wow.
But a lot of the kids, it's funny. We started a program here in Ontario called the Little NHL. And at the time it meant Little Native Hockey League. And because we went into the cities, not that we weren't good enough, it just sometimes the city didn't take a liking to someone who didn't look like them, who didn't live in the same neighborhood as them. So we were never, not that I didn't try out for some of those single A teams or double A teams. I just never made it. Whether I made it if I wasn't good enough or I wasn't the right size for the community is another thing. So what we did is we formed our own league. So we formed kind of like traveling teams from our own communities. We went to a tournament in Espanola, Ontario, and today we started off that tournament in 1972, I believe, and there were 17 teams. And the last tournament they had outside of before COVID, they had 245 teams in the province of Ontario, and it's still going very, very strong.
Yeah, again, I admire for the path that was given you, but the path you forged yourself, and having that opportunity from Bill. But what I want to know, and we spoke about this. I have a very good friend in Montreal, the native from Kanawaki, and we're really close. And I've talked quite a bit to him about the residential schools, the issues, and I've researched it a bit on my own. When I think of what I went through as a youth hockey player and how difficult it was just to make every team I tried out for and get those opportunities, and I guess what I want to ask is how difficult when you left the res, because I've seen it, and John talked to me about it, my buddy. He said, "Chris, a lot of these kids who live up in northern Quebec on the reses, the first time they come down to say Montreal on a trip is the first time they ever have to deal with that racism or that people looking at them different. And a lot of times it gives them that feeling of insecurity and they can't wait to get back to the Reds because they've had a bad experience. Did that happen to you? Like when you first got off the Reds the first time or the second time?
It happened at school a few times, but I had so much brothers around, and we were pretty tough. My brother was a pro boxer, and my uncles had the boxing gym in Sault Ste. Marie in the city, and a couple of my cousins made the '84 Olympic. The one that got canceled, boxing team. So we knew how to protect ourselves pretty good. But when we were by ourselves, when I went to Kenora, Ontario, that was the first time I really kind of faced any kind of direct racism on a daily basis. I was 16 years old, and there's, I bet you, for the first month and a half, I literally cried myself to sleep in Kenora, wondering why people would. I wasn't the biggest guy. I only played at 170, 175.
Yeah.
I was just barely 6 foot, and some of these guys were 6'4", 6'5", 230, and they were pretty big guys. And so you fight them at the hockey rink, and that's trying to make the team. Then you got to play the exhibition games and fight the opposition. Then you go to school and have a few fights there. So I stopped going to school. I didn't go to school the rest of the grade 9 year because I couldn't fight in two places at one time. And Chris, I wouldn't even. There's one incident that happened in Kenora I'll never forget. There's a thing in Canada called the missing and murdered women, and I was walking down the street one day in Kenora, and somebody thought I was looking at him and his girlfriend were making out in the car or whatever. And he grabbed me. He was going to throw me over the ledge of the hotel, and the ledge had to be 20 feet down, and it was into the rocks, into the water. And thank God, some of my friends I made on the hockey team seen me struggling with this man, a full-grown man, and they came over and rescued me. And I could have been, thrown over that edge. But those are the type of things that I faced on a regular basis. So when I talk about the age of 16, where the game for me kind of switched from love of the game to survive in the game, was probably the biggest movement, and a kind of that stubborn bone in me. And the stuff that happened to our people, I just refused for them to chase me home. The more they name called me, the more they fought, the more determined I was to stick it out. But do I remember hockey? I don't remember hockey at all. I don't even remember any practices. I just must have been one of those state of minds that just get through the year. And I came home and swear to God, I never ever put myself in that position again. But the next year, it must have did pretty good for my hockey development, because the next year I came home to Sault Ste. Marie, and I made the Sioux Greyhounds in the Ontario Hockey League, which is a major junior hockey, one of the three major junior hockey leagues that we have in Canada, with the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, the Western, and the Ontario. So to play with the Sioux Greyhounds near my home was probably, I wouldn't say worth it, but it was end result.
In Kenora, did you live with like a family?
I was telling my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we've been together, 46 years. But anyways, I was telling her, I mean, I live with another boy on the team. He's a school teacher right now, very good student. Never once did my grandparents ever say, "Hey, Ted, you going to school?" I slept until I got up, and they never asked me if I was coming home for supper. My coach was a vice principal at the school, I believe, and he never asked me if I went to school. So it was just one of those, if you send your son somewhere, or your daughter somewhere, you'd hope the organization would help take care of that child when you're in town. But up there, it was just one lost year.
Wow.
So you go from Kenora to the Sioux, play a couple years at the Sioux, and again, it must be, when I think of how difficult it must be from that standpoint. And in Kenora, you have the issue with this guy, an adult who is basically putting you in fear for your life and danger, and then now you're moving on to the Sioux, and you get to the Sioux junior hockey, and there weren't a lot of native boys playing in junior, right? At the time, there weren't a lot.
No. I think
Mm.
Dale McCourt was just kind of ending.
Yeah,
Dale grew up. There's a little bit difference between First Nation gentlemen who grew up on a First Nation community versus one that lives in the city. There's a little bit of
yeah,
a little
big
bit of a
difference.
cultural difference and what have you. So I'm not too sure if Dale got it as much as I did, but I got it pretty good. And a couple of guys in the league at the time, they're big guys. I mean, that Ben Wilson that played for,
Yeah,
he was a big man, and
Flyers. Yeah, well, I
trying to
know.
tackle those type
Right.
of guys on a regular basis, boy, it's tough.
So with there, when in the games and dealing with that part of it, and I don't want to get bogged down in this, but I think it's important for people to know, like dealing with that at that level. Was there anybody in management or people calling you names or saying you know nasty shit to you? Like, was there anybody there that would like kind of take your side and stick up for you and trying to get you through that?
Well, it wasn't so bad with the stands in Sault Ste. Marie because like I said, I had six brothers and a lot of them came to the games, and we grew up in a kind of a tough neighborhood. So
Yeah.
anybody who said anything to me, I'm quite sure my brothers would have addressed that right during the game. So I didn't feel so bad in Sault Ste. Marie, but there was two incidences that happened when I was playing with the Sioux Greyhounds. We were going down for one of my first exhibition games. I look out. At the bus, we're the last ones paying for our treats that we're getting at the local store going down to the game. And the bus pulls out and it leaves us on the side of the road. And I'm going, we're an hour outside of Sault Ste. Marie, heading down to Sudbury. The other guy who was in the bathroom, he missed a bus too. He hitchhiked back to Sault Ste. Marie. He said, "That's it for me. I'm not putting up with this stuff." And I go on the other side of the road and I hitchhike down to Sudbury. I make the game.
Showed up.
And then another time in London, Ontario, they left me behind again. So is that coincidences? I'm not too sure. But did I get the odd name called in junior? No question. I don't remember fighting in the game for the pure reason of a
Because of
fight. It
that?
was usually
Because of it?
it was because of it. You get
Yeah.
back to the reservation, you walk through, you squaw humper, all those type of things. It just gets annoying after a while, and you address it, and after you address it a couple times, then the word would spread. Uh, I wasn't one of those guys you could just name call and not defend what you said.
At what point, like, do you remember, like, when you started seeing like other players eventually, like, of your native descent, like, where you felt, because you probably had to have felt pretty alone, right? I mean, is that kind of like your initial feeling when stuff like that happens? You feel like
Yeah,
alone, or were you just was it you just kind of go ahead? Sorry, yeah, that was I
no,
guess the
no. If
question.
it's funny you said that because every year hockey from Kenora, I think I got severely scarred on that year because every year that I left after that, I was drafted by the Detroit Red Wings. I go down to training camp. Then there's Dave Hansen and all those guys at training camp. So it was pretty rough. And I remember hopping in a bus right after one day of practice. I said, "This is enough for me. I'm done." So I caught the bus back home. Thankfully, Ted Lindsay called me and explained how things work, and he brought me back. But did I feel like an outsider? No question. Every year even when I coached, I didn't feel part of, because when friends all grow up in the same neighborhood, they all kind of talk the same, they look the same, they go to the same events, and when you're a little bit different and you don't go to the events, they look at you quite differently. So I felt that from the time I put a pair of skates on.
Well, you stuck it out there in Detroit. You end up playing 3 years with the Adirondack Red Wings, and then up to the NHL. You played 41 games, and then back down to Adirondack, back up in '84 with the Wings for 19 games, and then you get traded, and you're in Rochester, Baltimore, and you played 18 games in Pittsburgh, 85, 86. And listen, I don't get it. Do you think, because when I saw you play, you can certainly skate at that level. You were hard-nosed. You were certainly a useful player, a guy that could certainly maybe not top six. I wasn't a top six, but you could definitely play in the NHL. There's no question about it. Do you think, your upbringing, where you're from, had an adverse effect on your career in the
I
NHL?
yes, I definitely
Mm.
do, because when even a coach, one of the coaches, grabbed the stick and he said, "I'll show you Ted Nolan School of Stick Handling," and he started using it like a tomahawk and started
Uh, that
pounding it. And
sucks.
all of a sudden, what are you going to do? I mean, you're
Sucks.
your first year pro, and I only knew what I knew, and I charged right after him, and I gave him the uh, biggest sucker punch I could find and jumped on
Yeah.
top. And I remember I skated right off the ice, took my equipment off, drove to the little apartment I was renting, told my wife at the time, I said, "Pack up, we're out of here. We're done." He said, "Well, what did you do?" I said, I sucker punched the coach. I said, "I don't think you're going to live with that too long." So anyways, I get a long story, I get a call from the general manager, and he arranges a meeting with the coach, and we went out for a while. We talked out our differences, but I think at the time it was probably so embarrassing for the organization to say, "Hey, how come this kid left?" So we dealt with it, talked about it, and forgot about it. And probably this is probably about the second or third time that I even mentioned the incident.
Wow. Do you think either of your sons are experience anything like that, or you think times have changed where hopefully they're not dealing with stuff like that, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know what? With both my boys, I built a hockey rink in my backyard, and and just like my brothers taught me, my brother was a pro boxer, and he taught me how to switch hands from left to right. And he said a lot of hockey players don't know how to do that. He showed me how to punch from the hip and all that stuff. So I started teaching my boys, and as soon as I started teaching them, I'm going, time they turn pro, fighting will be out of the game for sure. I thought. So, anyways, Brandon turns pro. Sure enough, the fighting's still there. So I said, "Jordan, we're going to teach you how to fight." So you just have to teach them to defend
Mhm.
themselves. But their upbringing and my upbringing was totally different. I
Yeah.
mean, their fridge was always full. The heat was, if we wanted air conditioning, we went and got air conditioning. They needed a ride to the rink. I give them a ride. So their life was a lot different, and we were kind of like mother and mother and Papa Bear. We went to every practice. We watched the behaviors of the coach, see if anybody said anything derogatory to them. And
Yeah.
so, no, they didn't have too much outside of the odd stuff, facing some opposition.
Well, that's good. And certainly there has been progress made, but it's nowhere certainly where it needs to be. And you go from playing, and certainly the Sioux was good for you, Ted, no question about it. And you start your coaching career there, and you were a midseason replacement, right? In what was it in '88? Um, Becoming that head coach at the time, and going in there, God, you you end up three Memorial Cups you went to, and you won one. Um, Man, you had some magic potion. What do you think it was in you that you were able to get through to these kids?
I think it was direct on how I felt as a player. Coaches seemed to talk to the star players more often. They understood their mistakes more often. They let them play after they made a mistake more often. And if you, as a fourth liner, you turned the puck over one time, they would just give it to you. And all of a sudden, if you turn it over too many times, it would sit you out. So I was wondering why they always treat people differently. And then I looked at my skin color. Then I went into the game, and how the society of the game treated you differently. So my whole approach when I started coaching was, I'm going to treat them the way I wanted to be treated. I wanted to give them respect. I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to explain to them if I did bench them or if I sat them out. They wanted to know why. No one ever told me. So I just it's funny, Chris. When I retired from the game, I went to the doctor and he told me I had two ruptured discs in my lower back and I couldn't play anymore. I walked out of that doctor's office with a sign of relief. I said, "Boy, I'm done. I don't have to go
Yeah.
back. I'm done." And so I went to school, and I ran into Frank Anzalone. He was the
Yeah,
head
I
coach
know
for
Frank. Yeah.
the head coach of the Lake Superior State Lakers, and that's where I went to school. And Frank asked me if I'd help out uh, during practice a few times, which I did. And then Phil Esposito, another name, he found out I was helping out the American team, and he said, "Why don't you come and help us out?" And I went over to, but a month later, they fired the head coach and asked me to take over, which I immediately declined. I said, "No, I can't coach. I'll help them in practice, but I can't coach." And he said, "Well, just do it for a little while." And that little while kind of went into a few games, and all of a sudden the fans are booing. I'm going, I'm just doing the guy a favor.
Yeah.
They should be clapping maybe. So, anyways, I found out that they think I can't coach either, just like I can't play. Now they think I
Yeah.
can't coach. So I went and learned how to be a coach. I went out and studied and how to put line combinations together. Um, and I brought a little bit of my own native spirituality into the game, because I'm from a family of 12, and I thought I was the gifted one of the family. Mom and dad liked me the best because I was an athlete. I was a powwow dancer. I went to ceremonies when I was a kid. Then my sister, I heard her say to her friends that she was the most spoiled one. I heard my other brother say the same thing. So when I found out, we all did. And that's the approach I wanted with hockey. I wanted every player to feel that they're an important part, whether they had 3 shifts, 4 shifts, or whether they scored 1 goal or a guy scored 50 goals. But I wanted them to know that they're going to get treated the same. And I think that's why some of the top end athletes, they learned after a little while. They made a mistake. They're going to sit just like the other guys did, not as long to take you, but they were going to sit a little bit.
So what do you think it was right away that made you think like you declined it? Like, why, you just inexperienced, or did you actually, like, with the way you were brought up, what were your expectations of these players? Like, I mean, I can only imagine, like, was it thinking like a lot of these kids are spoiled? I mean, you overcame a lot. And so, like, what was the initial reason you think why you declined that?
The reason I declined, because I was done with hockey. I just
Okay.
didn't want to go through it again. I didn't
Yeah.
want to get humiliated again. I didn't want to get name called again. I didn't want to feel like I didn't belong again. So I was done. And when I started taking over, and then Phil asked me to do it, which I declined. I did it for a little while. Then they started booing. Then I started talking to the players, and the players were asking me questions that I wanted to ask the coach, but I didn't have. I felt I wasn't worthy for the conversation, so I just zipped it up and I just played. And yet all these players were asking me questions, and I helped them as much as I could. Then I felt an obligation. If I'm going to coach these guys, I better know what I'm doing. So I went out and studied. I went out and studied like a fiend. I bought Phil Jackson's Sacred Hoops, which I think was a fabulous book. I got a hold of Ray Shiro, Fred Shiro's son, and found out what his coaching theories were with the Philadelphia Flyers back in the day. I called up a number of pro coaches that I had. I called up Bantam coaches that I had, and I talked to them for about a month, 2 weeks at a time, and I just accumulated all this stuff. And I went back the following year, and lo and behold, we went from bottom to for 3 consecutive Memorial Cups in a row, and I just really felt. Treating a group of young men or young women, whatever you're coaching, is getting everybody feel part of the unit and feeling worthy, and talk to them about their education, talk to them about their problems or issues off the ice. We had a young gentleman by the name of Chris Simon. At the time, he was going
Yeah.
down that road, which I could have went down that road just as easy. And I talked to Chris, and we give him I suspended him. Not because he was yelling at a referee. No, I suspended him because of his behavior, and we worked on it. And knock on wood, geez, he stopped going to the bars, and he was sober for like 17, 20 years, and he went off to win a Stanley Cup. And so we made a big difference in his life, and that's what I really wanted to do as a coach, make a difference in a young man's life.
And
That's awesome.
that's awesome. And I look at the 3 Memorial Cups, and the average guy, if they go to 3 Memorial Cups, if they go to 1 or 2, they're getting a sniff in the NHL, one way or the other. You end up getting hired as an assistant with the Whalers to start 94, 95. How did that come about? And geez, do you think you might have got a sniff at a head coaching job after what you did those 3 years straight?
Well, you know what, Chris, when you grow up on that side of the tracks, you
Yeah.
know exactly where your lane is and the expectations. And I knew if I was ever going to, which I never thought about going to the NHL to coach. I was happy doing what I did, but when I got asked to go, I got asked to go a year before. I got asked to coach the Ottawa Redneck Red Wings by the Detroit organization, and I thought about it. We went to 2 Memorial Cups and go and coach their farm team, and I didn't want to go, and people would say I was a flash in a pan. I
No.
was lucky. No, I wanted to leave as a winner. I wanted to win that Memorial Cup. So I went. I declined Detroit. Went back the following year. We won the Memorial Cup. Then a year after that, Jimmy Rutherford, who was a fierce competitor of ours in the Ontario Hockey League. He didn't like me too much, and I didn't like him much either. So we had some words, but at the OHL draft, I went into the bathroom, and Jimmy was in the bathroom, and he just took over copyware, or he just bought the Hartford Whalers. And so the right thing to say is congratulations, and if you do the same thing you did in junior, I'm quite sure you're going to have great success in the NHL. Then the next words came out of his mouth. He said, "What are you doing next year?" And my jaw almost dropped. And he flew me down. We had an interview, and he hired me to become the assistant coach with the Hartford Whalers.
And who was the head coach at that time, Teddy?
Paul Holmgren.
Okay, Paul was
Holmgren.
Homer was the head coach. So you start your career there, and then off to Buffalo that next season through '97. Now, God, you know, that whole Buffalo thing with you, and I watched it, man, and it seemed to me from afar and not knowing, but seemed to me your teams would go through the wall for you. They played for you. You looked like you had it going on. Now, uh, what happened in Buffalo? You get the job there. I've heard all sorts of things and rumors, and I know how people talk, and I'm like, man, uh, I have a hard time to believe that. And I want, I guess, to give you an opportunity to set the record straight here and let people know the real deal. And we spoke about what it was. You know, I've heard everything. You slept with the goalie's wife. You fucking did this, the owner, everything. And I'm like, man, it doesn't, from what I knew of you, and I knew you from afar. And honestly, I thought Ted Nolan was a nice guy. I couldn't see him doing that. Shed some light onto that whole Buffalo situation if you can.
Well, Chris, I had a long time to analyze it and try to figure it out myself, because I went into a very dark place about a year after I was let go by Buffalo because of all the stuff that you just said, and
Crazy.
actually the stuff that you just said, and people are actually believing it, and I'm
Yeah.
going. And then all of a sudden, you start talking about defamation of character, and you start talking about all this stuff, and going, and I called a good friend of mine. I said, Ted, when somebody has a multi-million, billion-dollar corporation, and a little guy like you going to fight, you haven't got a hope in heck of winning anything. So just walk. So I took his advice and I walked away. And I said, I don't want nothing to do with hockey the rest of my life. And I found out all those rumors. I went to a event. I went to a Buffalo Bills. I'd never been to a football game in my life. I went to the tailgating and all that stuff. And I was driving, so I drove home. A gentleman from Buffalo, and he said, "Geez, Coach, is it true?" I said, "What? That you slept with goalie's wife?" I'm going, "What?" So, anyways, he said that's a rumor all over town. So, anyway, I called home right away and I said, "Sam, another rumor I just heard today." And I heard the other ones. I was drunk at practice and drinking all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time and all that stuff. And Chris, probably that one probably hurt the most was the drinking, because my mom was killed by a drunk driver, and
Right.
I have 6 brothers who are 5 brothers who are alcoholics, and one's still here. 5 of them passed on now already, and because of that, so that one probably hurt the most because I try to pride myself on trying to be a good father, trying to be I went out for beers like everybody else did, but to say I was drunk at practice was. And I finally came to the conclusion they couldn't get rid of me because of the record, because our team was we won the Northeast Division title. I just won the Coach of the Year, so they can't get rid of me for
Right.
but they got rid of me for that reason. Then they said I was undisciplined. I wouldn't listen to management. But now you find out with the unwanted visitor. I did a little piece for TSN up here in Canada, and one of the first things I was told to do was with Pat LaFontaine got hurt, and I think it was
Yeah.
his sixth or seventh concussion, whatever. And anyways, we as I did during my coaching career, I'd call the players into the office, talk to them how the day's going, how's the kids, how the family, and he because no one ever asked me. No one ever asked me. He said, "Ted,
Yeah.
how's it going in life?"
Yeah.
Oh, my father just died last week.
Yeah, just get fucking ready to play. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it
you
was,
just get
right?
there and forget about that. So I really wanted to. So I talked to Patty, and I looked at his eyes, and his eyes were kind of twirling a little bit, and I'm going, "Geez, he doesn't look good to me." So I asked him. I said, "Patty, how you feeling?" He said, he said, "Good." I said, "No, tell me how you're really feeling. Not because I'm just asking you the question, how you feeling. You're just going to say, yeah. No, tell me how you really." I said, "Oh." Then he started crying. Then he started getting emotional. And then I'm going, "Gee, something wrong." So anyway, I told him I'm going to scratch him for the game. We're going to, of all teams, Hartford to play. And I mentioned he's going to stay home and get some rest. I'll make him an excuse that he pulled a groin in practice. The general manager found out that I was doing it. He called me up. He says,
John Muckler,
John Mucker,
right?
he called me up. He
Yeah.
said, "Well, what are you doing?" He said, "You're no doctor. You play him." I said, "We're paying him X amount of dollars, and you're going to play him." I said, "John, if I can't. I already give him a day off." I said, "You're you're not listening to me." I said, "I can't. I already told him." So anyway, he got the owner to call me. Then the owner called me and told me the same thing, and I'm going, I can't. So, anyways, I stuck by my guns. Thankfully, I did, because Patty went to the doctor, found out he had post concussion syndrome.
Yeah.
And after they found out, I thought I was going to get a slap on the back to say, "Good job, we never saw that." It
Yeah.
was, no, Ted doesn't listen to people. And all
Yeah.
of a sudden, the drunks and
All the
all
rumors
the other
again.
rumors started, and they just crucified me. And even I had one of the
Oh,
owners in the documentary saying, "Well, the plan was to give him an offer that we knew he would refuse." So we got it right on video that the gentleman said it. So all that stuff combined, I'm going, "Geez, I just really want." We're only here for a short time, Chris. We're not here
yeah.
for a long time, and I really want to enjoy my life. So I just walked away. I just walked
Yeah.
away.
Well, God bless you. And again, to have the strength to do that, and listen, it was a low ball offer, no question, but to have the balls to stand up to that and show your genuine care about Pat LaFontaine, a player for you, a guy that goes out there night in and night out, tries to do his job, is in a bad way, and you stick to your guns. That's courage. As far as the other thing, and I don't want to get into it, but the whole Muckler thing, and you know, listen, that old school in hockey, how things work, and then you end up getting blackballed basically, and that sucked. It's nice that you had that strength and the courage to walk away, but that um, departure from Buffalo, what did you do when you walked away? Like, obviously from going from coaching every day, being around the game, all of a sudden it's not there anymore. How difficult was that? And what was your next move?
Well, yeah, it was very, very difficult. Even affected my home life. I was frustrated because at the time my wife's the total opposite of me as far as she looks at the good in everything.
Yeah.
And I said, and we talked about some prejudicial things. He said, no, it can't be that. I'm going, it is. So, anyways, we started arguing a little bit, and it got to a point, Chris, it got really not very good between us. So I packed up and I left. I went home. I went back to the reservation, and I stayed there by myself. I left my two boys. It was probably the most darkest period of my life. I was feeling sorry for myself. I was feeling frustrated. I had emotions that probably I didn't learn how to deal with since I was a kid. Being sexually assaulted and all those type of things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just never dealt with it. I just packed up and I went home, and and while I was home, another tragic accident happened. My sister's kids got killed in a car
Oh,
accident, and so it just seemed losing somebody year after year after year. And my wife came home where we talked a little bit, and then I started looking at the importance of life finally again. And about 2 months after that, we finally got back together. She moved back home, and then I went to a movie. Of all things, I went to a movie one afternoon, and I
yeah.
seen the Muhammad Ali story with Will
Yeah.
Smith, and I'm
Yeah.
going, man, oh man, if this guy can go what he went through and do what he does, I could certainly get over hockey. So, anyways, I walked out of there a changed man, totally changed. I called up a few friends. I started up a golf tournament, and I started up the Ted Nolan Foundation, and we give scholarships to First Nation women right across Canada. And I'm very proud to say, Chris, of all the stuff that I've done, we raised close to $2-3 million for scholarships for First Nation women, and I named it after my mom. We call it the Rose Nolan Scholarship Fund. And so we started that, and I just loved it. I fell in love with it. We had tournaments, we had events, we had fundraising, we had a board of directors, and I was totally in tune to that. And we did that for about 6 years. I just closed it down last year for the
Oh,
final, and I give it to 7 universities that they can continue it for the next 20 to 25 years. So, anyways, I walked out of there, and I was totally happy. And then you talk about rumors, and I'm
yeah.
hearing on radio that Ted just came back from New Jersey interviewing with the Devil's Job, and that was so far from the truth. Ted was in talking to this team, which was totally untrue. And I finally said to my wife, I said, I should call the radio announcer, just tell them I'm done coaching 7-10 years ago. I'm not coaching anymore. Can you drop it? So, anyways, uh, lo and behold, I get a call that night from from Robert Irving, who owned the Moncton Wildcats of the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and he called me and asked me if I'd be interested in coaching his team. And I had no interest in coaching his team whatsoever. But he said he was going to be in Toronto the next couple of days. We went there and talked to him, and I called home, but 10 minutes in the conversation, and I called my wife. Said, "Guess what? We're going to Moncton."
You end
And
up in Moncton.
the only reason I went to Moncton was because this is the first gentleman that I met with that wanted me to be a part of his team, and it felt such a warm, welcoming, and talk about another Boston kid. Um, we got Keith Yandel up to play
Yeah.
for us. Brad Marchand was playing with the Bruins, and geez, we had a great year. We won the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League, and I was out of coaching for 10 years, and to go back into that environment and to win again, it at least showed I didn't lose my love for coaching. So, anyways, we did that, and I got a call from a team over in Latvia, and I coached 2014 Sochi Olympics. So. I really believe there's a guy upstairs directing everything, and there's plans and things happen in our lives for reasons. And what I went through into where I am right now, I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my entire life.
What was it like coaching Latvia? And then, was that you
Mhm.
were in? Were
Mhm.
you in Riga? Did you ever go there? And
Yep, that's where I was based in Riga,
yeah,
and coaching. And then thankfully, I coached two kids. One, Oscar Bartulis, he played with the Philadelphia Flyers for a little bit, and Marty Carsons, he played with the Boston Bruins a little bit. But anyways, they're both in Moncton when I coached. So when I went over there, and I knew Sandis Ozolinch. I never met Arthur Zerbe except for just a handshake here and there. He was there, so I called up both those men, and they both Sanders came back and played, and Arthur's helped with the coaching staff. So it was a great, and we took Canada right down to the limit. They,
yeah.
they beat us 2-1, but I tell you, it was the city of Riga, the people of Latvia. I tell you, that's where I really fell back in love with sport, because they showed you what sport is really all about. It's about co- it's about making friends, relationships, competition, and the best thing over there is that they shake hands before the game and they shake hands after the game. Over here, you're taught at an early age, don't like that guy because he's on a
Yeah.
different team. Don't even speak to him. Go on. That's not sportsmanship.
Yeah, a big difference. And God, it's funny living down. I was in Boston at the time, and I wasn't well. um, for a few years there, and didn't pay too much attention to hockey. And I flip on the TV, and this Ted Nolan coaching Latvia. I'm now, how the hell did he get there? But he's back. And then obviously after coaching with Latvia, you end up back with the Sabres, 2013, 2015. You were named the interim head coach after they Ron Ralston was let go. But at the time, was it Darcy Rogier was the GM, but then Pat LaFontaine came in, right?
Yeah, well, actually, no, Chris, it's when I did get my second chance into the National Hockey League with the New York Islanders
The Islanders.
after Buffalo, it was Pat
Okay.
LaFontaine, who was he was the senior advisor to Charles Wong, the owner who unfortunately recently passed away not too long ago. And so Patty was the senior advisor. And when I was in coaching in Moncton, Charles called me and said if I'd be interested in coaching the Islanders that season. I'm going, I can't leave now. I just got back coaching with Moncton. I promised I'd be here for the year. He said, well, Ted, we can't promise it'll be at the end of the season. I said, well, thank you, but I'm going to stay. And then, but Patty got me there. And then with
So what
the
goes around comes around, right? You
yes, and
know.
then I'm coaching over in Latvia. I'm coming back from a tournament, and because I called Patty, we came in, we kept in contact, and I called Patty about a Broadway play because he's from Long
New
Island.
York.
He knows
Yeah.
all the Broadway stuff. So I called him about this stuff, and I said, you know anybody get good tickets? So he called me when I was coming back from Latvia, and he said, Ted, I can't get those tickets. I said, shoot. You know anybody else? So he said, no, you're not even going to New York. I said, what? He said, you're going to Buffalo. I'm going, what? I didn't even know he was with the Buffalo Sabres. So he's the one who brought me back to Buffalo again. So I owe a lot to my good friend. Not only did I coach him, but we became really good friends over the course of the year, which I still contact a lot of my former players. And we created a bond and a friendship that lasting hopefully for the rest of our lives.
No, I was just gonna say, what was that initial feeling like when you heard Buffalo? Like, was it kind of weird? Were you kind of hesitant? What was that like?
I was very hesitant. This is
Yeah.
when I said I didn't want to go
Right.
back. This is the first time I swear to God I didn't want to do it. But when a good friend of yours calls you and say it's going to be good, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do things right. So it didn't take much convincing after that. I said yes immediately because not so much coaching the NHL again. It was just coaching with a good friend of mine, Pat LaFontaine, and the projection that he had and what we're going through. And I jumped on it immediately. And then all of a sudden, my heart was broken 6 weeks later when Patty was let go.
Yeah, it was incredible. I saw that whole thing, and I just, hear you back, and I just love the story how you went to bat for Pat LaFontaine. You had the courage to stand up to, what you felt was right and was right. And then you forged this relationship with this kid. And I played with Patty, Team USA in the Canada Cup. And I absolutely love the guy. He's helped me recently, I'll have you know, with my some other things. But he's just an incredible human being. And in you and that relationship with him, I think that's so awesome. And that's to me the real story here with Ted Nolan. And through all this adversity that's hit you, honestly, and you've dealt with during your life with your, your charity and the scholarship thing for your mom and what you're doing now with your child, I just think it's so admirable. And, certainly I'm proud of you, Ted Nolan. I am.
Well, thanks, Chris. When you start looking at, when people talk about all, I don't think there's a perfect person on this earth. We all make mistakes, but you want to remember the good things. And talking about Pat LaFontaine, when I got the Buffalo job for the first time, we went back home. We had a fire in the backyard, and my younger brother asked me and says, "Ted, what the heck are you going to teach Patty LaFontaine that he doesn't already know? He's a superstar. What are you going to, I'm coming from junior hockey basically. So what are you going to teach him?" I said, that was the first time I got stumped. I'm going, what am I going to tell him? I mean, I'm not going to teach him how to be a better player. You can't be better than what he already is. And so that question stuck with me for 3 months until I went to training camp. And then who's the first guy I meet at training camp? Was Pat LaFontaine. And there was two young kids walking out of the arena, and he called them both by their first name. And I said, and they went to his hockey camp in the summertime 5 months previously. I'm going, and he remembered their names. I'm going. So anyway, I called up my brother. I said, I don't have to worry about Pat LaFontaine. He's going to teach me more than I could teach him, just by seeing the type of gentleman that he was. So we formed like I said, I'm proud of a lot of things, but forming relationships with some of the people that you work with is stuff that we create through sport.
All right. And so are you going to coach again or what? I mean, it's all 2017. You come back with the Polish national team. What's that all about? You didn't have enough.
Well, you know what? It's a funny, Chris.
I
My, my,
love it.
my if someone asked, I would. I find it, maybe it's in my culture, maybe it's in my upbringing that you don't want to ask people for jobs, but if they're looking for someone who could maybe coach, they could ask you. So I'm kind of sitting around waiting for someone to just like Robert Irving called me up and said that was the first guy in 10 years that ever called me up, and then I get a call from Poland and. They asked me, and I went over, and maybe I shouldn't have, but like Poland was kind of they're in the second division, but the way they treat their athletes is a little bit off what I normally do. They want their players practicing double practices 5 days a week, exercise off ice and sauna, and like 7 days a week. I'm going all year long. I'm going. It's not like North America where you just do your hockey season, then you go home. Over there, they keep the guys busy all year long, and I didn't really agree with that philosophy. And so I did it for 1 year, and but I found we couldn't compete with everybody else being beat up like we are on a regular basis. Because when I coached Buffalo Sabres, I still remember Gary Yelly talking to me.
Yeah.
Was
I
another pretty
played with
good.
Gary, right?
He's another good. And anyways, I give them a day off after a long trip. Then I give them another day off after another long trip. And anyways, long story short, after about 3 or 4 months, Gary comes in my office and, Coach, we have so many days off, more days off than I've had in my whole entire career. I said, Gary, if you're rested and you're full with family and spend, because we're away from our families, you know it, Chris. We're away from our families so much. So I tried to find out when players' kids were birthdays, and I kind of give them a day off. Go spend some time with your family, because family to me is probably the most important thing. I probably wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for my family. So I'm a big family guy. So I just and rest. If you're rested and you feel good about yourself, you're gonna play even harder. You're gonna work doubly as hard as you normally would, because you know you're gonna have some time to rest. So I'm a big rest guy and a big family guy, and I think if you do those two things together, you're gonna have a pretty good united group.
No, this has been this. You have your story, Ted, is amazing. Honestly, it's like this. It's like a story of so much hope in the sense of you kind of define like what we're trying to do with this podcast. And if you Google you and people that don't know you, they played in the NHL, coached in the NHL, but it's like the story of how you got to the NHL. And then what amazes me is like when you first got asked to coach, you were like you declined it. Like in your head, you were like, I'm never going to be a coach. To what you did and how you coached in the NHL. And then obviously what happened in Buffalo, you did what probably most people want to do. And that's just run and get away and just leave the scenario. And then you get asked to coach there again later on, you take it and you take it. And I think that's amazing. And that's the story of change and hope and all that. But What's it like for you to watch your kids play today?
You know what? That was probably the only hockey I watched.
Yeah.
I don't get me wrong. I not that I just kind of like some. I dislike some of the things hockey does, but I love the game. I think it's a wonderful game. I think you pass and you block and you do certain plays off face-offs. I mean, it's a wonderful game. So when both my boys took a liking to it, I watched every one of their games, and I was very lucky to go down to L.A. and watch Jordan, who was a seventh round NHL pick, and all of a sudden, being part of two Stanley Cup winning teams, bringing the cup back to the reserve
Yeah.
on two occasions, and we have sunrise ceremonies, and we went down to the graveyard and had a sunrise ceremony. But both my parents have passed away. We went down to the graveyard, and my father's name was Stanley, so we kind of brought the Stanley Cup down to Stanley at the graveyard. And next year we came back because my mom was a big powwow organizer, so we had a powwow with the second Stanley Cup. The third one that he won with, he was part of the team with St. Louis. We just had a little family gathering with just some close friends. But to watch him do what he did, and my other son play too, but he suffered a severe head injury when he was only 24, 25 years old, ended his career. So, but they both love the game, and that's probably the best part about it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And now you're still coaching somewhat. You have the Three Nolans hockey camp you're doing with both your sons, Brandon and Jordan. How is that, and how is that impacting your community?
You know what? This is probably the best job that I've ever had because I'm working with my two boys. We're going into communities that don't have access to, if they break a stick, they have to wait for a shipment from an airplane coming in a month later.
Yeah.
If their skates are dull, they have no skate sharpener. So going into communities that are a little bit off the beaten path, and we have 43 remote communities right here in Ontario alone, and a lot of those communities are food insecurities. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's some suicide issues that we're dealing with and what have you. So to go into the community and bring a little sunshine and hope through the sport of hockey, it's wonderful. We go in, we have a parent session, we have a kid session where the parents get to ask some questions about what it's like when you leave the community. What type of treatment do you expect? And it's funny. I was talking to some NHL people lately, and we've been doing this now since I played my first game in the National Hockey League when I was 26. 40 something years ago, or almost 40 years ago. And I think I've been educating the wrong people. I think we have to educate the people in the mainstream where some of our kids are coming from, some of the issues that they face. You don't know if they're hungry in the morning. I went to a lot of practices where I was hungry, and I went to a lot of schools when I was hungry, and maybe I wasn't the best student in the class that day. But maybe there's a reason for it. So to educate people of where some of our people are coming from, or people that don't look like them, where they come from, could be a big help. So working with the Three Nolans, my two boys, going into schools, we get some good donations. We give them jerseys. We give them some cases we give them sticks. We bring in some extra skates when we could. So it's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, that's certainly it's awesome to be able to work with your sons and stay connected to the game. Certainly that you love. Do you think, looking at the NHL and what they're doing now, do you think they do enough for the initiative to combat racism and and kind of accelerate those inclusion efforts for minorities and stuff? Do you think the NHL does enough?
They're trying. I don't know if
Yeah.
they really are, and by go by going into our communities and showing them that they do care is going to go a lot more way than doing a infomercial on TV and say we really stand with you. I think that the biggest incident that happened in the States was with George Floyd, and how that really awakened everybody. And I think hockey of all sports, I think that's one that needs to be awoken. Probably the best. You look at Major Baseball did. You look what
Yeah.
NFL did. You look at NBA did. Now hockey, it's still about 97% Caucasian people that are playing. So we got a long ways. And another factor now, more so now than when we played, Chris, was the
Yeah.
cost. I mean, the
Yeah.
cost is crazy. Uh, to do what I went through and how I got there, I would never be able to do it in today's world, because there's
Right.
so many power skating and edging work and high-end hockey schools, and kids are being so far advanced that you can't keep up. So we got a long ways to go, and but we're slowly chipping at it, and hopefully I'll see a difference between before we go to the next part of our next chapter of our lives.
Yeah, I got a couple more little things. I know Barry's going to ask you a question. My producer Barry. Um, just two. I want to say two things before I do let you go. And one of them: would you ever coach again in the NHL if you were offered the job?
I would coach if someone called me up and sincerely wanted me to be a part of a team, and not a token. Yeah, hey, let's fill in that gap. No, I never wanted to be part of that gap filling process.
Yeah,
But if someone really sincerely wanted me to help, and it's funny. I think I'm a better coach now than I was back then, because when you're young, you're
yeah.
26 years old, 30 years old. You think as a 30-year-old does. And as you get older, you get more wise to events in the world, and how you could even communicate better, and what you've learned, and all the history of what you went through. I sincerely believe I'm a way better coach than I am now than I would be when I won Coach of the Year with the Buffalo Sabres, because now you had the maturity to add on to your motivation. So would I coach if somebody wanted me to coach and asked me to, not just to fill in? I would love to.
Well, I'd love to see that happen. Maybe one day again you get that opportunity. I certainly, always admired you, and even more so today, hearing your story. And really, you're a good man. I wish you nothing but the best in your future, no matter what you do. And you stay in touch down the road, Ted. You're a breath of fresh air, my friend. I'll be honest with you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Like I said, I'm an admirer of yours also, and not only because of your toughness, but it seems like we almost had a similar type of upbringing and background
Yes,
where
we
we keep
did.
where we are, and it's not easy. It's not easy to, even in the best of times, what you fought through and how you got to where you got to, and how you had to overcome to some of the difficulties that you had in your life, like we all face, and where you're sitting today. That's all we have. So
Well, it's funny,
congratulations.
not funny, but Ted, just quickly, that the Irish community and the Native community, there are a lot of similarities when you talk about alcoholism, abuse, drug abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. Maybe not to the degree that we've seen over the years on the res, but there's a lot of parallels there, no question about it. And yeah, again, good to have
Okay.
you, Barry. I know you're dying, Barry.
I'm
Yeah.
dying to
There
ask
we
a
go.
couple questions. Ted, I can't tell you how much we enjoyed. I'm sure they did too. I've enjoyed this tremendously. Really, I love listening to you. I had three questions. How do you describe your coaching style? If your players were to describe your style, how would they describe your style?
I would say, I cared about our athletes. I really sincerely cared about the athletes, and I never judged on wins and losses. I never did. If we played to the best of our abilities and tried as hard as we could, to me that was always winning. And you can only give what you can give, and if the players give what they had and you supported them, so I would say I just really can care. With if they had a bad game, I felt bad for them. If they had a great game, I felt happy for them. And but sometimes when you get too happy, you get too high, and then when you get too lost, you get too low. So just kind of maintaining that thing. So I would say my thing would be, number one is I do a lot of things in life. I'm very passionate about the caring of the athlete.
And are there any? Is there if I had a Mount Rushmore of coaches, where would you who would you put on other than yourself? And you were looking at the Mount Rushmore coaches. Is there any a few that you say yourself those are people you emulate, or is it really You didn't, I wonder if there was just any of them you
Mount
really say
Rushmore.
yourself, what?
I never
Mhm.
met too many, but from what I met one would definitely be up there is Al Arbor, and talking to all the Islander players that I had a chance to, and what kind of man he was outweighed his winnings. So Al Arbor would definitely be there. One of the guys I studied from when I became a hockey coach was a basketball coach, Phil Jackson. How he had native spirituality into his line of work. I just loved it because it wasn't all one dimensional basketball. It was about life. Uh, Vince Lombardi. You look at what he did, and he only had something. I didn't study him as deeply as Phil Jackson, but just how he had 6 or 7 plays of whatever he had, and he just did it. And that's what we did with my hockey team. We had how many face-off plays can you actually do? How many ways can you practice warming up a goalie? Like how many systems can you actually have in hockey? It's not too many. But
No.
if the players are doing it with a little kind of love and a little kind of passion and enjoy going to the rink, because before you know it, they're not going to the rink anymore. They got to go out and find a real job and live the rest of their life. But while they're playing the game, to make it very enjoyable. So those would probably be my 3 guys. And one of them I had a privilege of meeting in Al Arbor.
And
That's
my
awesome.
last question that I love asking, if I was writing your hockey eulogy, what would be the first sentence of the eulogy?
Um, I cared. That's all I could do is I cared. Uh, I didn't start playing hockey because I wanted to play in the National Hockey League. I played because I loved the game. I didn't start coaching the hockey game because I wanted to get the NHL. I coached it because I love the game. So unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are that are left out that really truly love the game. And I'll close off with one story. The guy maybe I would put on my Mount Rushmore. He was a Bantam coach in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Uh, and when I became the head coach of the Sioux Greyhounds, the first guy I hired was a gentleman by the name of Mike Zuke.
Yeah.
And he coached the Bantam hockey team in Sault Ste. Marie, and from Ronnie Francis to Paul DiPietro, every really good player ever played in Sault Ste. Marie, they all went to his outdoor rink. And he knew more about hockey than he probably forgot more than I knew. And how he studied the Russian mentality and how he was a smoker at the time. He passed away a number of years ago. His son played with the St. Louis Blues, Mike Zuke Jr.
Yeah.
And I remember him grabbing the ashtray and pulling out all the cigarette butts and putting them up as a line and put his fingers through the ashes and through the red line, blue line. And we just talked about and how he made a shoebox. He made a shoebox out of wood, and he put rubber around the bottom of it, and he put it at center ice. And he put half the guys on one blue line, half on the other blue line, with 3 pucks, and they shoot it and try to hit that box to try to push it over that line to them, and they would try to push it back. And the trick was the box was the size of a hockey blade. So you're passing you're trying to hit that. You're improving your passing. So all those crazy things. I just love the guy, and he helped me even love the game more.
Ted, certainly awesome, and you do care, and I can tell by the way you speak. And I got to tell you, I love you. You're a good man, and I wish you nothing but the best moving forward, my friend. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Likewise, back.